behind every immigrant, there's a sense of mourning. An immigrant has lost his family, has lost his friend, his culture, his language, and a few other things that we need to not only adjust, but we need to learn how to live that out right now that we are not there anymore. So, and that was for us. We didn't know, I mean, we didn't see that happening in us, but when we look on back, yeah, that happened with us as well. It wasn't easy to understand a different culture, a different language.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sowers Podcast. My name is Matt Naismith, and I am your host. This podcast features stories of Canadian church planters and leaders who are influencing kingdom movement and impacting their communities. Whether you're a church planter, pastor in a church, part of a church planting team, or someone just wanting to learn more, we pray you get inspired to become a sower in the places where you live, work, learn, and play. We pray this is a blessing to you, and if it is, we would ask you to share links to episodes, subscribe on whatever platform you are using. With that, let's get to our next conversation. Welcome, friends, to the Sowers Podcast. Whether this is you returning for a second, third, fourth, or fifth time, or this is your first episode, a special welcome to you. It is great to have you with us for another episode and a conversation that will hopefully inspire you to become a sower in the places where you live, work, learn, and play. If this is you returning and you've been encouraged by any of the conversations that you've heard so far on the Sowers, I would love to hear from you. And so would you email ask@thesowerspod.ca. Once again, that's ask@thesowerspod.ca. And I'd love to hear what in particular was of challenge or encouragement to you, and maybe some of the ways that you are taking the action steps from these podcasts to become a sower, again, in the places where you live, work, learn, and play. Well, today you are going to hear a conversation that I had with JD Fasolino. JD is an incredible leader. He is the pastor and church planter of Emmanuel Baptist Church East in Toronto. He is also the director of Send Network Espanol here in Canada. And JD and I talk about reaching Hispanics. We also talk about the experience of someone coming to the country for the very first time and what that means for their identity, and often what that means as far as their grief. I think you're going to be challenged by this conversation. You'll learn a lot. And so without further ado, here is my conversation with JD Fasolino. Well, JD, I want to give you an official welcome to the Sowers Podcast. Thanks for joining us for this conversation today.
Thank you, Matt, for having me here. It's a blessing and a privilege.
JD, would you share with us your personal journey of coming to know Jesus?
Absolutely. So, whenever I share my testimony of coming to Christ, I begin by saying that I was raised in a home with Christian values. Although my dad was not a believer until the last years of his life, he was never opposed to it, and I thank God to that for that. But it was through my mom that I came to know Jesus as my personal savior. She always took us to church and every church-related activity. And I'm going to say either you like it, you want it, or not. We had, I have a saying that in my house was the law and not the grace ruling. And I thank God for that as well. So my grandfather was a pastor. He was one of the founders of the Southern Baptist Convention in Venezuela. He was sent from Colombia, where he was born, to do that. I'm from Venezuela. But it was at the age of 12 that I understood that God does not have grandchildren, but children. So I took the steps of seeking the Lord personally. At 13 years old, I got baptized. And after a few years of understanding all this that was happening in my life due to a personal situation that I faced, it was the death of a really close friend and a non-believer friend. I was confronted with the reality of the gospel that is not to be known, it's not theory, but it was to be experienced, to be lived out. So even though I came to Christ at the age of 12, as far as I remember, or I was baptized at 13. It was a few years during that journey. So that's me now.
So share with us, JD, a little bit about the church in Venezuela. What is the culture? I think when I think of South American culture from my experience with it, there's elements of a very strong Catholic presence. Is that the case in Venezuela? And so what was that like being part of a Baptist church as well as then the cultural influence?
It is the case. You have that right. So in our countries, from Mexico all the way to Argentina, and even Spain, of course, and the Catholic, the religion is there, and it's tradition, it's culture. It's not only something that you do, but it's that your family. So to go against religion is to go against your family that deep. So it's not easy when you are not there, when you have a different religion. And we always said, of course, we always said, and we know that it's not religion, it's relation. But if you don't know, you don't know. So being in a different religion was not easy. Being a child or being a teenager, and everybody pointing out of you, and everyone going to mass or going to celebrate things that you don't celebrate. So it's very, very confronting. As I said before, in my family has been my grandfather, has been my mother, and now it was myself and my siblings, my sisters. It wasn't easy. But one thing I can tell, at one point I realized that is dangerous even for us evangelicals to see church, either Baptist or Presbyterian, Anglican, or Alliance, or you name it. So to see church the same way others, Catholics specifically, they see the church as the place you go, and you go on a Sunday and that's it. I mean, there's a little danger there. So again, it was not easy. Everywhere there was a challenge.
Now, something that might be unique with that, in some sense, I mean, when you'll meet somebody in Canada that is Catholic, I would assume that there is a different understanding than being in South America as a Catholic versus being an evangelical Christian. Sort of in the way that you talked about it there, you said it was of a different religion. In Canada, the average person probably thinks about more of the similarities between some Catholic faith and Christian faith. Could you share with us a little bit more about the distinctions within that culture, which would probably reveal also for those of us in Canada, the distinctions between Catholicism and Protestant Christianity?
Absolutely. That's a really good question, Matt, because there are differences for sure, but there's one thing that we need to be careful about, and that's the specific of seeing your relation with God as your tradition, as your culture, and we know it's not. So when I first came to Canada, one thing that came to mind was, and not only Canada, I'm not going to say only Canada, but I know it's the same in the States and maybe some countries in Europe. What we were living in our countries with the Catholic religion, I was able to see it here with the Protestant religion or group. Everybody go to church, and if you ask someone on the streets, yeah, I'm a Christian. Yeah, I know God. Yeah, and I do believe in Jesus, but that's pretty much it. So they go to church on a Sunday, and maybe they do church stuff during the week or during the summer, and it is a religion, so we need to be careful on that. So when we started to think about planting a church, we had that in mind. We were very careful. We don't want to be this way that we know that we have learned in the past within our culture, our ethnic group, Hispanics, but we need to be very careful here, not to go to this way. I don't want to go to the left, but at the same time, I don't want to go to the right. I want to keep in the center. We know Christ is the center, the Bible is the center. So, yeah, it is really good that you bring that to our conversation, because at some point I was able to see the similarity. Catholics or even evangelicals.
Now, when you meet someone with a Hispanic background, are you immediately aware of some of the, well, someone might use the term baggage or just their experience with Catholicism? Would you say that that's a way that they're warm to the idea of coming to join your church, or is it considered more of a negative experience?
I'm laughing. I know they cannot see those listen to the podcast. They cannot see, but I'm laughing because I mean you're right to the point, man. You're saying that if I meet someone, am I able to understand where is he coming from? Yes, because the way they speak and even the way to refer to me or the church, I laugh because there was a guy here in our church, Fernando. He's from Peru, and he had a strong Catholic background. And by a strong Catholic background is because his uncle was an archbishop. How do you say that? He was not a bishop, but he was even,
Archbishop?
yes,
Okay.
he had a strong Catholic background. So I wasn't the pastor for him. I was the father. I don't know how to call it, the priest. And he always calls me that. Not anymore. He has been with us for over 3 years now. He got baptized, his family. But at first, and people kept laughing around him because he had that terminology. So it is strong, and even the Bible they use, and I'm okay with them bringing the Catholic Bible to the church because they can read the Bible, and actually we encourage them to read the Bible, but it's not easy. Again, I'm coming back to the point of saying that there's a thin line, and we need to be very, very careful. But yes, coming to your question, yes, we are able to see, to hear, and to see those differences uh, in place.
My assumption would be then that when someone truly they've known of Jesus, but to truly come into relationship with Jesus and then to be wooed towards a true discipleship or apprenticeship to him, that must be like a true light bulb moment for many people. So share with us maybe an average story that you have of reaching a person with a Hispanic background who comes to really know and experience Jesus for the first time, and how their conversion story typically will go. Because I'm sure you've seen it time and time again.
We have seen the good and we have seen the bad. I need to say that because it's always not always is a good story behind that, and I can start from a story that I have in my heart because it didn't end up being a good story. This guy was all in. He's a farmer worker. He comes here to work on the farms, and he was into our Bible studies. We were doing a Bible study with them every week and reading the Bible and sharing our faith, but in a more informal way. And he was so pumped about that. He was coming early every Tuesday and asking questions. So when we came to the point of, so what do you think? And even baptism, he one day told me, you know what? I talked to my wife about it. His wife was in Guatemala, back in Guatemala, where he lives. And he told me, I talked to my wife, and my wife said to me, don't you dare to change religion. Don't you dare to go against our family. Man, that was hard to hear. And that was a story that has not a good end of the story. I do believe that he knows what's right and what's wrong right now. But he came back to Guatemala. He hasn't come again. So I don't know what's happening there. So, but there's good stories, of course. And you said it right. The bulb like shining and seeing their faces, seeing their eyes. Oh, I didn't know about this. Oh, but this is in my Bible, in my Catholic Bible. It says what you're saying. And yes, and even I need to share this with my mom and with my family. So people that we have a lady, her name is Rita. She's from Cuba, but she has been living here in Canada for quite a few years. She's a widow. She married a Canadian, and she came to the church because of the things happening when she lost her husband. So, but she was a Catholic lady, and she said it from the beginning. The first time she came, she was straight to me saying, "I'm a Catholic pastor, so I'm not coming looking for anything, but I'm looking after God on my way to do it." After a few months, she came back and she said, "I want to hear more." After a few months, she said, "I need that." And so she got baptized, and she's one of the leaders here at the church. Her English is she's completely bilingual, and she's actually translating not every Sunday, but the services that we do in Spanish, we always have translation to English. So she's actually taking care of that ministry here at the church, and that was 3, 4 years ago. So that was one of the stories. There's others, but yeah, we have seen that. We have seen
Wow.
that happening.
Wow. And JD, what's your story of coming to Canada? What was the motivator of why you came to Canada? And what have you observed and learned since being here in Canada? But first, share with us the story of the motivation to come to Canada.
The story. So one of my sisters, she decided to move to Canada 19 years ago. Then my wife's brother, I mean my brother-in-law from my wife's side, he decided to do the same, and they didn't know each other. And we started to hear people in Venezuela, in Caracas. I'm from Caracas, the capital city, talking about Canada and the opportunities here to immigrate. We never pay attention to it. We thought that was not for us. But it just so happened that in 2009, we came to visit my sister. I think it was a 10 days trip only. It was a vacation. So on our way back to Venezuela, Andreina, my wife and I, we look at each other and we ask each other, how do you like Canada? How about Canada? So we started to pray about it and look for God's will on this. And after a couple of months, we started to process. I mean, we started the process in Venezuela. We said, God, if this is coming from you, we are not to move until you said we do. So we received a residency, our Canadian residency, living in Venezuela. We did the process there, and we said, okay, we can see that God is behind this. So that's pretty much our story. We came in 2012 with no kids. At that time, we were almost 7 years married, but we said, okay, let's see if God wants us to do this. So, and by coming here, when we first came, the very first thing that we have learned is that immigrate is not easy and it's not for everyone. And that's a big learning that we need to have in mind, because we may see others, oh, what's happening? This person is not taking it the same way we are. It's not for everyone. It's not easy. If I can share one thing that it maybe was that the big moment for Andrein and I when we started our church planting journey is that behind every immigrant there's a sense of mourning. An immigrant has lost his family, has lost his friend, his culture, his language, and a few other things that we need to not only adjust, but we need to learn how to live that out right now that we are not there anymore. So, and that was for us. We didn't know. I mean, we didn't see that happening in us, but when we look on back, yeah, that happened with us as well. It wasn't easy for Andrein and for me to understand a different culture, a different language. Yeah.
And what have been some of the things you talked about, the difficulty that someone coming to Canada for the first time will experience? There's this sort of subconscious, and I'm sure in many ways a very conscious grief and mourning that is happening. But what have you observed and learned as you've come to Canada about what seems to be a stereotypical, or whatever you would say is of Canadian culture? And so what are you observing, and what are you learning about what it now means to be here? You said some people come for opportunity. Is that still the case? Do people still see opportunity in Canada?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most people, we come here looking for a better future. That's reality. What we don't have in our countries, we are hoping to have that here, especially if you are a person that have traveled, that has gone to different places, or even if you have made one trip only to a different country and you see, oh, things are different here. So that's one expectation that we bring, that in most of the cases is not healthy. But it is one thing when you come as a tourist to visit, but it's a completely different thing that when you come for good, when you come to settle here. So there's expectations that most of the time, the first year, the first months, the first year, those expectations are not met. You don't realize what's happening. And the thing that is happening is that you're living here now, that you need to understand quite a few things. You need to understand the language. You need to understand the culture. You need to understand that things here work in a different way that in our countries. The way you drive, the way you do things. I mean, there's no things coming to my head right now, but there's a lot of things. People get so frustrated when they got to do the test for the driver's license. And that's what big example. I've been driving for 20 years, and how come I cannot pass this thing? Well, because rules are different here. So many things, Matt, that you need to realize that it is frustrating. It is not easy, and we need to be aware of that. So
Mm-hmm.
everything that we can do to help newcomers realize that from the beginning, it's a plus, it's a winning.
Well, I wondered, JD, if you would share honestly about, you said, they come here, people come here for opportunity. Could you share with us why the opportunity is good? I know that yourself and Andrina, through our church planning assessment, will oftentimes recommend a book. I think it's called Why I Hate Canadians. And I believe the author genuinely appreciates Canada, but he's writing that because for the average Canadian, they don't see the benefits. They take for granted many of the realities of what that means. So could you unpack that a little bit for us? What are truly the opportunities that are provided in a country, in a place like Canada, speaking from your own experience, coming from a country like Venezuela? Because I think it's important for our listeners to know that and to hear that.
Oh yeah, and it's a very good question, Matt, because yeah, we may have different perspectives, and by we not talking only about you and I, but some people that they have even different perspective. Reality is that in our countries we need to work the same amount of hours that we work here. Reality is that you can do an extra effort everywhere you are. I mean, it's not when I'm saying it may be easier here. I'm not saying that you don't need to work or you need to work less. No, but the reality is also that if you work here, if you do things right here, well, you may have a capacity, a financial capacity, or you may have a better life because you're not worried for the things, the political issues, social issues that we have in our countries. You're not worried to go to the streets. You're not worried for your kids going to the streets. So those kind of things is the things that you put into perspective when considering moving to another place. For us, specifically, Andrea and I, and you asked me to be quite open and honest, for us was to have kids here in Canada. At some points, we said, we don't know, in Venezuela is so hard for the new generation, and it's not easy. So coming to Canada and having kids here for us was a plus. And we always said to them, I have two boys, Daniel and David, 10 years old, 6 years old. You have been blessed, being born here in Canada. And you don't know, and we always said to them, this is happening in Venezuela. I think we need to be very careful on that because at some point they were asking me, why my mom-in-law, I mean, why my grandma is still in Venezuela? Things are not good there. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying you have to be, you have to be aware of the things that are happening here in Canada because not everybody has that. So I don't know if that answered the question, but
No, I think that's very helpful. As you know, I was expressing in the question. I think many people that live here whine and complain about Canada, but we have so much to be grateful for. So, in that vein, how many Hispanics are in the Greater Toronto area? And you also work with Send Network Espanol, giving you're the director for Canada. So, from what you've researched, studied, how many Hispanics are not only in Toronto but across Canada, and what is happening within church planting amongst Hispanic peoples in the country?
Most people don't know about this, Matt. Even Hispanics. But there's an organization here in Canada called Hispanic Canadian Heritage Council that they have been fighting the last two census that Canada has released, 2016 and 2020. And they have been fighting the census because of the way Hispanics are being measured through the census. So we have different names, and some people refer to Hispanics, some people refer to Latinos, some people even they use a word that I don't know how to say it properly in English, Ibero-Americans, those coming from Europe, Spain primarily. So when you go to the census, it's like three or four different groups that is only one group. So you need to add those numbers. So if you go to the census, you're gonna see between 700,000 and 1 million in Canada. But that's not reality. We're close to 2 millions. And when you realize that that is close to 5% of the population, that makes a difference on the way you see Canadians. I mean, on the way you see Hispanics here in Canada. I know in Canada, different other ethnic groups are majority groups instead of Hispanics, but there's a large number of Hispanics here. And for some reason that I honestly don't have the answer, the last few years, the last 2, 3 years, I'm going to say, yeah, 2, 3, maybe 4 years, Hispanics have been coming in large numbers, in big numbers. So I'm expecting the next census to say that, because we can see them, we can hear Spanish on the streets as we didn't hear before. I can hear Spanish on grocery stores. So it's different now. So it's a large number coming. And when it comes to church planting, there's one thing that I always point out is that in Canada, especially in Toronto, but I know this is in most of the big cities in Canada, we have the Chinese town, we have the Greek town, we have the Portuguese town, the Italian town, or even if we don't have those towns, we know where South Asians are in the city. We know where they are. But with Hispanics, it doesn't work that way. We don't have a Hispanic town, and we are all over the place. So when we consider church planting, we consider it as a must. Churches need to go to different places because Hispanics, we are in different places. When we planted here in Ajax, I mean, Ajax is at the east of the city of Toronto. And that was in 2015 when I moved to Ajax. 2016, we started our church plant. And at that time, I had several people asking me, "Are you sure? I mean, are Hispanics living in that area, in the Durham region?" And I was pretty sure, because we had two Hispanic stores here. At that time, I didn't know, but now I realize it's because of the farms. But we do have Hispanics here. The thing is that we don't know, because we don't see them. There's not a group that you can recognize as a Hispanic group, because we're mixed, we're blend, we are from different countries. And that's one thing to know as well. Even though we all speak Spanish, there's a cultural difference. I'm a Venezuelan, and we're bordered with Colombia, but Colombia and Venezuela, we are different. In every country is different. Yes, we all speak Spanish, but we are different. So we call our churches a multicultural Hispanic church. We are the same ethnic group, but we are multicultural.
And would there be uniquenesses and differences in the Spanish from country to country?
Oh yes, absolutely. You cannot talk about sports and food, but everything else it's okay to consider. But we all have saying things that we didn't know actually. Oh, you do that, or you have that, oh, you eat that. We as well. There's other things that we say. Oh, how come you eat that, or how come you do that? And even words, Matt. I keep telling everyone. I came in 2012, so it has been almost 12 years for me learning English and Spanish. Because from the pulpit, I can tell you this, I need to be very careful on the things I said, because for some others, even though it's Spanish, it may sound strange, weird, offensive. So I need to be careful on that.
Talk to us about the planting of Hispanic churches. So your church got planted, and from my observation, the stories I've heard, your church has planted a number of churches now. So talk to us about how that happened, and now what's happening through the planting of not only from your church being a mother church now to daughter churches, but then there's also planting, as you said, amongst would the proper terminology be migrant workers, those that are coming and working in the summer, and churches are being planted in some of those settings. So talk to us first about your church and then some of the other planting that's going on.
We moved here in 2015, as I said. Our mother church is in Etobicoke, that's west of the city. So we moved to the east to plant a church, seeing the need and knowing that there was a need here. And yes, 3 years down the road, when we started our church plant, we were blessed to receive a family from Venezuela that I didn't know. I didn't know them. People may think that, oh, you're from Venezuela and he's from Venezuela, so you knew each other. No, we didn't. So it just so happened, God thinks that he was a pastor in Venezuela, so he didn't move to Canada. He was here for personal reasons, family reasons. But being here, he came to our church and we started to talk, and yeah, he came through the pipeline, and he ended up planting a church. That's the only church that we have planted as a mother church, as you mentioned before. We have helped other churches. We have a residency program here in our church. So last year we had 3 residents. One of them is in Calgary, and the other 2 here in the city, in the GTA, the Greater Toronto area. This year we have 4, 2 in person and 2 online. The online are in Alberta, and the other 2 here in the city. So I thank God, because that's a DNA that we have in our church now. Our church from the beginning, they knew that it was all about church planting. It was not all about growing in numbers. That's great, but it's not what we're looking for. We're looking not to have many people, but many churches being planted. And yes, the farmer workers ministry was something that we focused on at the beginning, during our church planting journey at the beginning. Right now is one of our daughter church, a Faith Emmanuel Baptist Church. They are taking over that ministry, and they are doing an excellent job on taking care of the farmers and that ministry. So that's the way of multiply. It's not you doing all the time all the things that needs to be done, but to raising up leaders and raising up others. Last year we were blessed to send our first missionary through Send Relief. He's a journeyman, and this is a youth that we all love. And as it happened, when we sent the pastor to plant the church, there was a few people coming to me and say, "Do we need to do that? Is that something that it's gonna be good for us?" Yes, it does. Yes, it's gonna be good for us, and yes, we need to do that. So it has been an interesting journey. It has been a blessing.
And just for those that aren't familiar, what is Send Relief?
Oh yes, Send Relief is the NAM's arm for compassion ministry. So everything that has to do with refugees, to care for others, and even to help churches on how to do that. So it's an important ministry that we have through the North American Mission Board.
Amazing. And JD, something that I think a lot of us in our network are thinking about, a number of our churches are ethnic, and there seems to be a lot of conversation about reaching the next generation. And so, what would you say are some things that current churches, Hispanic churches in particular, how are they thinking through how they're going to reach the next generation? Because I'm sure your sons, maybe you would think of this as your sons. What will their experience in the future look like as it relates to church? Will it be a Spanish speaking church, or what are your thoughts about reaching the next generation?
Oh, this is something that I have been sharing with others and talking to others because it is so important, Matt. We need to focus on second generation for sure. My first response to this, whether it's Hispanics, Asians, Africans, etc., is that there is no way to properly reach out a second generation if you don't start the right way with the first generation.
Mm.
So we need to focus on the first generation. And I can see and I can hear people always asking what's going to happen in the future with the second generation. And again, that's something that we need to pay attention to for sure. But let's start from the beginning and let's move there once there is a foundation, because there's a danger, and it's thinking on that or doing something to that when you don't have a proper foundation to do that. And another thing that is important and is important to consider is that before the second generation, we have what has been called the 1.5, and I guess you're familiar with that. And 1.5 is those that were born outside of Canada but came here as teenagers or even younger. So it's interesting to use a word to see them among others. It's interesting that they are not 100% Hispanics in our case, even though they were born in a Hispanic country, but they are not Canadians. So they are not first generation, they are not second generation. And that's one area that needs to be explored. And we have seen that most of our families, they come with teenagers or children's, and at some point they realize I wasn't born here, but I'm living here now. It's different. You mentioned my boys, they are Canadians, and I'm always teased with them. You're Canadians. Why? How come you're telling me that you're cold? You're Canadian. Come on. So, but in this case, it's different. So we need to have that. We need to be aware of that. Every church needs to be aware of that. Let me give you an example, a personal example. In the church we planted, the church I'm pastoring, from day one, we have been translating everything to English. We didn't have no one at that time. Maybe one lady or maybe the husband of this lady, but we said everything that we're going to do, it has to be translated to English. If we have one, let's do it. If we have 5, 10, great. So we need to pay attention to that. It's not that we need to close the door and we are Hispanics, we only speak Spanish, and this is about us. No, it's about the community. The church needs to look like the community where the church is. So that's an important thing that we need to pay attention. But again, I'm gonna come to the beginning of my answer. But the beginning is with the first generation. We need to focus on them. We need to discipling them. We need to pastor them, care for them, and then they are the ones raising up the second generation.
I think that's a really important point that you've just made, JD, and probably a really important balance of correction and nuance to the continuous. Again, as I said, we're oftentimes talking a lot about it. Well, you're saying, well, listen, we're not going to have the second generation unless we reach the first generation. So let's also make sure that we're planting churches that will reach the first generation. That's a really good perspective. How can those who listen to this podcast that are praying people be praying for Hispanic churches getting planted for you as you lead Send Network Espanol here in Canada?
Thank you, Matt. Um, we always ask others to be aware that as we started this podcast, that immigrate is not easy. So if you have been living here for quite a few years, even though you're an immigrant yourself, you know that. So we all had the first day, the first week, the first month. So one prayer request will be for us as a church to be aware of that and to take care of those coming to Canada from different backgrounds. In our case, are Hispanics, and they are coming looking for a better life, as everyone does. But I keep saying there's no better life than in Jesus. There's no better life that for you to have your mind and your heart in the right place when it comes to not only learn about Jesus, but to live out as a disciple. So please pray for us on how to disciple, how to not only reach out to, but how to disciple those newcomers, and even those families that, as you said before, they are grieving, they are mourning because there's a loss in their life, and they're excited because they are here now. But at the same time, during holidays, they are sad because they are not with the family. So that's one thing. The other thing, the other prayer request will be for us to continue learning how to move, not only here in the city, but in Ontario, in Canada, reaching out to Hispanics. We know they are here, but as I said before, they are everywhere. So we need to look after them and we need to care for them. And that's our call, to care for Hispanics and to plant Hispanic churches.
Just as we close, JD, this question is coming to mind, and it's maybe for myself. As you said, Hispanics typically are not moving to one location in a city. They're living everywhere, and so likely then, more often than not, people listening to this podcast may have a Hispanic family that's living in their neighborhood. What would you say is kind of an easy way for someone to connect with a Hispanic family in their neighborhood?
Oh, that's a great question, and I don't want to get into trouble because, as I said before, well, different cultures. But I'm going to say that most of Hispanics, we have been very blessed to not only see, to receive a warm welcome from others. That's one thing that for most of us, it has been in our hearts. Oh, wow, this person or my neighbor or this person from work, he invited me to come over and to have lunch, and he told me a few things that I need to know on doing the things that I'm doing now. That's a way to reach out to us, to embrace us. We always tease with each other because we are warm people that we like to hug each other and we like to do things a little bit different. And we like not to only do that, but we want others to do that with us, to be warm with us. And that's one missing piece that I have heard most Hispanics complaining about. Oh man, it's so different. I'm on the streets and I don't see I don't know the name of my neighbor. So I keep telling them, well, you need to go there, but it will be great if actually the neighbor comes to us and to say hi and to introduce himself or herself. Yeah.
Thank you, JD, for joining the Sowers podcast today and sharing all of this with us.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Well, friends, like me, you were likely challenged, convicted, maybe encouraged by this conversation with JD. I love JD's countenance, his ability to speak truth, yet with deep kindness and love and compassion. The emphasis that I want to give for this episode's action step is in relation to JD's comment and commentary about the mourner inside of every immigrant. This stood out to me as I was having this conversation with JD, and it made me realize the opportunity that is before me to connect with those in my city, in the places where I live, work, learn, and play, where somebody is experiencing grief of a lost culture, of a lost community, of lost friends and family, and the opportunity that I have to show them warmth, to show them kindness, and to show them welcome. And so that's the action step coming out of this week's episode. for you to identify somebody that is new to this country and to show them warmth, to show them kindness, to say welcome to this new place for you. If you need any help, please let me know. Well, as always, friends, thanks for joining this episode of the Sowers Podcast. Please go ahead and share if you would. We do not have a particular marketing department, and so our listeners are those that get the word about this podcast out to others. Thanks in advance for doing that. And now here is a clip from my conversation that you will hear next week with Jason McGibbon of Hamilton Fellowships.
We're really going to be on mission and reach the world. Like, there's so many cultures and subcultures. There's so many groups of people that exist that if we're just running a program and trying to either entice people to come to us, which isn't a bad thing. I'm not saying anything against that, but I think it's far more effective if we can empower each person to see you're made uniquely. You have unique relationships, and whether that's where you live, whether that's where you play, whether that's where you work, you have unique relationships that nobody else is going to have. And especially if we're using our interests, you're going to be able to plug into a community that, you know, nobody else has that in with. And that's how we take the gospel, right, and spread it to all different parts of community and culture. And when we don't do that, I think we run the risk of missing big segments of the population or giving up our missional opportunities, but also our prophetic voice, right, of being the church who speaks into culture.